Welcome to this review of the nervous system anatomy for Bio 233. My objective with this video is to review the basic structures of the spinal cord and meninges and to show the location of a handful of major nerves. Your job is to review these structures and learn where they are so that you can earn the best score possible on your lab quizzes and your lab practical. Remember, spelling does count, so you'll want to be certain to review that too. Keep in mind with this video, I'm just reviewing a lot of the basic structures that are likely to show up on your quizzes and practical. If you are responsible for other structures, they'll be listed on your lab practical review sheet, so keep that handy while you study. The spinal cord is made up of bundles of nerves that send and receive information from all parts of the body. As you can guess from this image, the spinal cord is surrounded by the spinal vertebrae. Quick question. Do you know which kind of vertebra this is? Is it the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, or sacral? Did you say cervical? How do you know? I hope it's because you looked at this bifid spinous process. That is a classic hallmark of your spinal, or your cervical rather, vertebra. If you said the cervical, gold star for you. Great job. If you didn't, it might be worthwhile to go back and review some of the information from earlier in the chapter so you're ready for AMP2 next semester. So the spinal cord passes through the vertebral foramina of your spinal vertebrae, and it's the bony structure of the vertebrae that protect the spinal cord from injury and impact. In addition to the bone, the spinal cord is protected by three connective tissue membranes called meninges. The first meninx is the singular for meninges, is called the dura mater, or the hard mother. It's made up of dense irregular connective tissue, and it's the strongest of all of the meninges. In this image, the dura mater is located here. By the way, remember how the prefix epi means above or on top of? This is the epidural space, so it's chock full of blood vessels and fat. Why am I pointing out the epidural space? Well, when someone gets an epidural to numb pain from the lower abdomen and legs, anesthetic is injected into this space, the epidural space. The second meninx is the arachnoid mater, and I'm not sure you can see it, but I hope you can. There's a very thin membrane right here, just deep to the dura mater. This is the arachnoid mater. It's a very delicate membrane, and it resembles a spider web, which is why it has the prefix arachno in it. So arachno means spider. So this is the spider web layer. Deep to that, you have the pia mater, or the little mother. This is actually continuous with the spinal cord. It's attached to the surface of the spinal cord, and it's very delicate and difficult to remove. So this oval structure sitting in the middle of the vertebral foramen is the spinal cord. And if we look kind of along the midline of this structure, we'll see some prominent features that we should be able to define. The first are a pair of slits that basically cut the spinal cord almost in half. You'll see them right here. I've highlighted them. One of these is on the anterior surface. This is called the anterior median fissure. Median because it's kind of along the midline in the sagittal plane. So you know that's the median plane, right? So that's where the median comes from. And this is on the anterior side of the spinal cord. How do we know it's the anterior side? Because this is facing the anterior portion of the body. So the front of the body would be in this direction. So that means that This side here, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not doing a good job here. This side is the anterior face, or the anterior aspect of the spinal cord. And this is a fissure. So remember, fissures are deeper, slightly wider grooves. They're a bit bigger than a groove, really. So this is the anterior median fissure. Opposite of that, you have the dorsal median sulcus. The dorsal median sulcus. And it's on the side where we find the vertebral spinous process here. So that means that this has to be the dorsal side. So that's why it's called the dorsal median sulcus. In the middle of the spinal cord, you've probably noticed there's a little pin-shaped hole. This is called the central canal. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through the central canal, bringing nutrients to the nervous tissue of the spinal cord and washing away wastes as well. But the cerebrospinal fluid isn't just located in the central canal, it actually bathes the spinal cord. So we're going to find it surrounding the spinal cord from all sides. This is a picture of the spinal cord, but minus the vertebra. Can you spot the anterior median fissure? How about the dorsal median sulcus? Right. This is the anterior median fissure. Notice it was a wider groove on the anterior aspect of the spinal cord. And then this right here, this kind of thin sulcus here, this is the dorsal median sulcus. It's important for us to be able to spot the anterior and dorsal aspects of the spinal cord in order to name the remaining structures that are necessary for your quizzes and your practical. So let's add a label to this figure so that we can remember the orientation of the spinal cord without thinking too hard. The next things that we need to label are the dorsal root, the dorsal root ganglion, and the ventral root. Bundles of neurons enter and exit the spinal cord through structures called roots. The roots on the posterior surface of the spinal cord, or the dorsal portion of the spinal cord, are bringing sensory information to the central nervous system, and they're going to go through the dorsal roots. So you can actually see they broke the bundles out here as they go into the spinal cord. Okay. A collection of cell bodies for these sensory neurons are located here. Can you see the bulges? These are called the dorsal root ganglia. Each one is a ganglion. Okay, so basically it's a collection of cell bodies, and then the axons continue on to the spinal cord. Now, the dorsal side, or the dorsal roots, are always bringing sensory information. That's why I drew in blue. Your textbook uses blue to represent sensory information. Let's talk about the opposite side. This is the ventral root. And in the ventral root, axons from neurons are actually leaving the spinal cord, and they're taking information about movement or secretion in the case of glands, okay, from the central nervous system out to effector organs. So the messages, in other words, are moving in this direction, and they're going to go through these ventral roots. So that's motor information. Your book uses red to represent motor. Okay. Now, the dorsal root and the ventral root eventually meet right here, and they're going to form a spinal nerve. So here you can see the dorsal root and the ventral root come together, forming a spinal nerve, which is going to go out to the rest of the body. Okay. Another reason to write dorsal and ventral on your piece of paper is that it's going to help us to talk a little bit about the white matter and the gray matter of the spinal cord. Let's start with the gray matter. The gray matter in the spinal cord in this picture is kind of represented by this off-white brownish color here. Let me highlight it. This is your gray matter. Okay. So the gray matter in the spinal cord forms 4 columns, and these columns are called horns. Horns. Do you see how they form a kind of butterfly shape? Well, the horns are going to that point to the dorsal side of the spinal cord up here. These are called the dorsal gray horns. Gray for gray matter, and then dorsal because they're pointing to the dorsal side. They're on the dorsal aspect of the spinal cord. Okay. These horns house parts of the somatosensory neurons that send information to the brain about sensations felt through the body. And that makes sense, right? Because we had sensory neurons that are coming into the spinal cord on the dorsal aspect. Makes total sense. Opposite of that, we have the ventral horns down here. Why are they called the ventral horns? Because they're on the ventral side of the spinal cord. Now you can see how the axons from these motor neurons are leaving the ventral horns on their way out to the ventral roots and then out to the rest of the body. Okay. Next we have the lateral horns. So the lateral gray horns are right here. They are lateral or on the sides. Okay, and these horns consist of gray matter, and they contain portions of neurons that innervate the visceral organs and the pelvic organs. The gray columns on the left and right sides of the spinal cord are connected by this middle part here. It looks like a bridge. This is called the gray commissure. The gray commissure, and it allows communication between the left and the right sides of the spinal cord. Now, white matter surrounds the gray matter, and it contains bundles of myelinated axons. That's what gives it the white color. This part of the spinal cord acts a bit like an information superhighway, transmitting action potentials at great speeds. The axons are bundled into areas called funiculi. Each one is called a funiculus. The plural is funiculi. So the dorsal funiculi, there's one over here, and there's one over here. Okay. They're going to carry information, usually that pertains to sensation. The anterior funiculi are located on the anterior aspect of the spinal cord, generally like this. Okay, so those are your anterior funiculi. And then you have the lateral funiculi, which are over here on the side. At some point, you should take a look at this in a little bit more detail. But for right now, just be aware that the funiculi basically house different types of motor and sensory tracts that are going to shuttle information between the brain and the rest of the body. So this image shows you some of those tracts. Right now, you don't need to know them, but just be aware that they're there. Nerves are bundles of nerve fibers, that is, axons, that transmit information to and from the central nervous system and the various parts of the body. you should be familiar with the locations of the following nerves. The femoral nerve, located here, is the largest nerve of the lumbar plexus. A plexus is a network of intersecting nerves. The femoral nerve runs along the anterior aspect of the upper leg, but it has branches that extend laterally, such as these, and medially. So medially it forms another nerve called the saphenous nerve. So you can see it there. Although it transmits sensory and motor information, the primary function of the femoral nerve is to control the muscles that allow us to extend our knee and flex our hip. Sometimes this nerve is anesthetized during surgery in the lower leg for people who can't receive general anesthetics. At a little less than an inch in diameter, the sciatic nerve is the largest nerve in the human body. Its function is to innervate the muscles of the posterior thigh, controlling knee flexion and hip abduction. So if we were to look at the back of the body, we would see this nerve emerging from the spinal column, okay, from spinal nerves L4 through S3. Some anatomists think of the sciatic nerve, and I'm continuing to draw it here, as being a bundle of two other nerves. The tibial nerve, which is the one that I'm drawing now, so this is the tibial nerve, and the common fibular nerve, which goes over here. So I'm going to put an arrow with a T on this side, so you know that that's the tibial, and an arrow with an F over here. Now the same thing is happening on the right side of the model over here, but because of the orientation of the leg, we can't really see what the sciatic nerve is doing, but it would be running along the back of the body in this direction again, and then we'd get that split where the tibial would keep going straight and the common fibular would come around here. Okay, so again, this would be the fibular, the common fibular. Okay. The tibial nerve innervates muscles of the calf and some in the foot, and the common fibular nerve innervates muscles of the anterior leg, the lateral leg, and again some muscles in the foot. From a practical standpoint, it's important to know where the sciatic nerve is located. Again, it runs along the back, the posterior aspect of the body. Okay, we need to know where it is, especially when giving intramuscular injections to the gluteal muscles, as inflammation or damage to this nerve can be extremely painful to a patient, and it can make movement of the lower body uncomfortable. If you have a chance, look up the term sciatica to learn about another painful condition involving the sciatic nerve. Finally, we need to know three major nerves for the upper body. First up is the median nerve. The median nerve arises from the brachial plexus here at the axilla, and then it goes down the arm here to the wrist and to the hand. This nerve innervates most of the muscles in the anterior forearm and some of the muscles of the hand. In general, this nerve helps muscles perform pronation of the arm, flexion of the wrist, and flexion of the fingers of the hand. It's also responsible for movements of the thumb. When the median nerve is compressed by a sheath called the carpal tunnel, inflammation of the nerve can lead to carpal tunnel syndrome. Symptoms include numbness, tingling, and pain along the nerve track. The radial nerve, which is located here, is a major nerve of the arm derived from the brachial plexus also. This nerve descends the arm and it wraps around the humerus and innervates the triceps brachii and other muscles of the posterior arm and forearm. This muscle activates muscles this nerve activates muscles to supinate the arm and extend the wrist and finger joints. The branches of the radial nerve innervate the skin of the upper arm, providing sensory information to the central nervous system. The final nerve is the ulnar nerve, which is coming around here, and it's going to go a little bit further down. Like the median and the radial nerve, this nerve arises from the brachial plexus and descends the medial aspect of the arm. At the elbow, it passes near the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and as you are probably aware, if you've ever bumped your elbow in such a way that it went numb temporarily, we often say that we've hit our funny bone, when this is really not funny at all. What you've really done is you've hit your ulnar nerve. In the forearm, the ulnar nerve branches to innervate muscles on the anterior aspect of the forearm and in the hand. The nerve provides limited motor function and some sensory function. And that brings us to the end of this video. So for your practical and for your quizzes, you need to know something about the structure of neurons, the structure of the brain, the structure of the spinal cord, and you need to be able to identify these major nerves that I've listed in this video. If you have time, you'll also want to review the cranial nerves. There's a special folder in your labs folder for your course space that has videos and resources for the cranial nerves. I highly suggest that you're familiar with them, you familiarize yourself with them before you go on to Bio 234. I hope this video has been helpful. I look forward to seeing you in the lab next time.